Greetings, one and all, to our wonderful, ever-increasing, I have to report, audience of The Media Beat. And we have hit episode 90, and we are here with Maureen and Claire, as ever. And you know we are a podcast that likes to give our listeners good value every time. We're not complacent, and we don't take you guys for granted. So today we thought we'd offer perhaps one of the most valuable episodes of all time with not one, but 2 deep dives. We think we're crazy giving away so much to our listeners, but hey, we think you're worth it. So both Claire and Maureen are going to lead a deep dive today. We've got one on podcasts, one on M&A with examples, and we have no time for any news. This reminds me of the 1930s and the BBC, where occasionally you'd get a man presenting with a dinner suit on saying, today there was no news. That would actually happen when there was no news. The BBC would have to announce the fact that there was no news today. Nothing has happened. Now the weather. But there's no news this week, but we do have podmojis. So a special episode for number 90, 2 deep dives, set of podmojis. What more could you want other than to crack on? So the first one is one of those ones that Claire does about a subject where you think, well, I know all about that. And then she goes into it and you go, I did not know that. I remember the one about Spotify was particularly good on that score, but they all are. This is about podcasts. Now, it's a bit meta because this is a podcast, as you probably noticed. But we haven't done a deep dive on podcasts, where they came from, what's the market looking like, what are they, why they're so brilliant. Open brackets, they are, close brackets. So Claire thought she'd do one of those. So Claire, I know that you've been somewhere this week, which has helped with some of the content of this, but please let us hear your thoughts on podcasts.
Yes, it was last week, actually. It was MIP London here in London, as the name indicates. And I moderated 2 panels on podcasts. And it was actually a very interesting thing, which is the reason why we thought it would be good to have a deep dive, that what is essentially a TV conference, MIP, decided to have a very heavy podcast presence. And I was lucky enough to moderate a conversation between Tony Pastor, who is one of the co-founders of Goalhanger. We're going to talk a little bit about Goalhanger and what they do, and Pedro Pina, who's managing a lot of content on YouTube. And then the next day, I had a fantastic panel with senior execs from Podimo, from Little Dot Studio, from Acast, and from Patreon, talking about business models of podcasts. So, like a little magpie, I gathered information and I came back and I did some research as well, because I do that. And so I'm going to tell you about podcasts. The first thing I learned when I was preparing for the podcast panels is where the word podcast comes from. It may be obvious, but do you know it came from the iPod? It's from the you knew, of course.
Yeah. I didn't know. I didn't know.
I should say, by the way, to our listeners who may not have the image, that Oliver wasn't actually around in the 1930s, I believe. And certainly with his new webcam, he looks too young for that. So I'm assuming he heard this story somewhere else. Anyway, the podcast, the name podcast, came from the iPod and the word broadcast, and it was what they call a portmanteau, which is a French word. But so it started, very much as a sort of RSS-fed hobbyist, audio only, mostly audio only, I would say, content, to what is today almost a $40 billion global media industry, which is insane. And one that sits really at a very interesting intersection, because it includes, it straddles the creator economy, it straddles television increasingly, and of course, digital advertising, more and more. So here I'm going to start with a bunch of stats you'll be happy to hear. In 2025, there were 584 million podcast listeners globally. That's a lot of people, 500 million people listening to podcast, up 7% year on year. And we're looking at another significant increase in 2026, going up to possibly 620 million people. We don't exactly know how many podcasts exist, but around 4.5 million podcasts are currently indexed. So there is a lot. In terms of revenues, I've just said 40 billion. The global podcast market reached approximately $39.6 billion in 2025. But perhaps more importantly, it's growing at just under 25% a year. So it's exploding. It's a very, very fast growing market. And there is a clear shift in the structure of the industry, especially as we will see towards video. But before I go into that, I want to talk to you about something quite interesting. So I've heard this term. I didn't really understand it until I thought about it. Podcast is a barbell market. There are a few very big ones on the one end, on the one side of the barbell, and then there's a lot of very, very small ones. Between 47 and 90%, that's a very large percentage of range of podcasts failed before episode 3. And only about 5% reach 100 episodes. Now, we're not quite at 100 episodes, but if we do make it, we will be in the top 5% in terms of longevity. So another 10 people, we can do it.
Easy.
The other big stat is that only 26% of independent podcasters actively monetize. So there's a huge, as somebody on the panel put it last week, there's a huge monetization gap. There's enormous amounts of content that are getting listened to but are not being monetized. So it's a very sort of unequal market. There's a very small percentage of people that capture most of the advertising. Now, in terms of listening, the people who do listen to podcasts listen to a lot of podcasts. 93% of listeners finish most of all of an episode, and that's something we see as well with our stats, that people do listen to the whole thing. Average weekly listening time is about 7 hours, which is insane in my view, because that's an average. Very interestingly, podcasters now match journalists for consumer trust. So it's a very, very high level of trust, which is a very interesting thing. And we know, Acast put some research out that said that 84% of listeners will take action after hearing, for instance, creator-led ads. So it's a very efficient ad market when you can do it. Now let's talk about the video pivot, because that is the big thing that we've been listening to and hearing. We've moved to video, people. You can find us on YouTube if you want to. We're also still on audio. It's a very interesting mix, and there was a lot of conversation about that on the conversation I had with the Goalhanger co-founder. Some people prefer video podcasts. Younger audiences tend to prefer video podcasts. And when they watch video podcasts, they tend to watch them on the TV, on connected TVs, using YouTube as a platform, but using it on the TV. Amongst the popular show, about half of them offer video now. 37% of US monthly listeners watch podcasts in video format. There are 1 billion monthly podcast viewers on YouTube these days. And about 45% of views would be through smart TVs. The other thing that Tony from Goalhanger said is that the higher quality the video, the more views they get. So they started it as just filmed podcasts. They then started acquiring clips from archive. They started editing it slightly differently. They started adding music, etc., etc. And the more they made it look like TV, the more people watched, and they watched for longer. So there is a sort of quality premium absolutely on video podcasts that is very clear. The other thing that the podcast market is demonstrating, and we talked about a lot last week, is that long form really isn't dead. Neither long form nor original content. In a world where we hear all about, phone scrolling and short form vertical dramas. And we hear a lot about library content and how it's so difficult to launch original IP, etc. What we know is that 75% of Gen Z adults listen to podcasts. 30% spend more than 2 hours weekly on digital audio. And that 84% engage with video on some level. They like the younger audience, that's what we hear, is driving a hybrid models. They like the shorts, they like the clips, they then like the full episodes, and then they're quite happy to pay for subscription. So I think, and that's what we heard from Patreon as well last year and last week in Podimo. There's a real understanding that you are prepared to pay for quality content and for the content that you want to listen. So the business model for a podcast, which is still emerging, is very much a mixed model of subscription and advertising, increasingly. So it's really become this sort of space. There is definitely a parasocial element. You feel very close to the podcast host that you listen to, as you do with a lot of the creator economy content. But there's also a way for a lot of people to satisfy intellectual curiosity. And, it's something that people listen to during workouts, during commute, at home in the evening as a group. There's not really a fixed time for listening to podcasts. Now, I wanted to deep dive into one case study, which is The Rest is History, which you may have heard. It's a very famous podcast. The Rest is History is a goal hanger podcast. It really should be a very, very niche podcast. We're talking about hours, hour plus episode of very deep dives on very specific historical topic. It's actually become a cross-platform juggernaut. 70% of listeners are under 40. Half of the listeners are under 35. It's successful on both sides of the Atlantic, both in the UK and in the US, although the US audience, we heard last week, is a little bit older. It's got 1.2 million YouTube views monthly. It's got 45,000 paying subscribers. So it's a very interesting case study. We've all heard about The Rest is Politics, obviously, which is, you can see how it, that's a news-driven agenda, etc. But The Rest is History is very much showing that there is huge appetite for very specific niche content, long form video and audio, with the right talent and the right content. So The Rest is History is a big success of Goalhanger, which is the network between all of the Rest is franchise, and they are a UK company, and they are sort of represent the industrialization of this model of podcasts. So, in total, they have 750 million views. They have 250,000 subscribers. They've extended their brands. They've done a deal with Netflix now. They've got money from the Churning Group. As they invest, they are growing extensively in the US. They have very much invested in YouTube. They told us last week that they actually have a slightly different edit. Ideas there, Oliver. A slightly different edit for YouTube than for audio, because they are very, very data driven, and they've analyzed all of the data around their YouTube content, and they've realized that it doesn't behave exactly as the audio listeners would, which is, completely understandable. So it's been a very interesting case study, and I think it still will be, and it will be very interesting to see where it goes, because it's building its own IP. It owns everything. Even in the deal that they've done with Netflix, they keeps owning everything. So what we are here is, we really are at this crossroads where you have two different models. You still have the very, very successful creator-led independent model. Patreon alone has paid $10 billion to creators over the last 12 years. So there's a lot there. It's direct subscription models. IP ownership stays with talent. And then way over on the other end, you have what I'm going to call the celebrity vodcasts, but somebody called non-union talk shows, which are, essentially talk shows, but very ad heavy, very well sponsored. They get, the Golden Globe for best podcast now. But it's interesting that Amy Poehler, who, by the way, does a great podcast, Amy Poehler won it. So, it's a sort of industry talking to the industry kind of thing. They have, if you watch the Amy Poehler podcast, you will see that they have a studio set up, they have multi-camera, they have additional, content, etc. It's edited. So it's a very different model. So it's an interesting place to be for this world of podcasts. Even the word itself, podcast, doesn't really mean anything. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens this year. We're still expecting global growth. We're still expecting long form depth, even though we seem to be entering a short form world. We're still experiencing very high levels of trust with podcast creators, perhaps more so than any other genre at the moment, in a world where trust for content sources everywhere is going down. And we still have fairly low barriers to entry. So people can still come in and compete, even though we're seeing those big people coming in. So, let's see what happens next. That's all I had to say on podcast. It's just quite fascinating, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I don't know whether or not you tackled this and whether or not it's even relevant these days to say, is this television or not television? Is podcasting becoming television or not? does it matter? I mean, my perception of just listening to you rattle off all of those statistics, this is, which is fascinating. Absolutely, I loved your deep dive there. It's podcasting becoming a fuller media business. And what's wrong with that? Probably with the video, is the top of the funnel. Audio, and it'd be interesting to hear your comment on this. Audio clearly is still the habit. I wonder. There's that intimacy, isn't there? And then the smartest operators, I think, are becoming, this kind of, offering the services of which payment model. So there's subscriptions, there's live events. You've got now Preet Bhavara going on stage in New York, having that conversation. You've got merchandise, you've got communities around the core relationship. So I think this is a big signal for format shift. And I think it's really an industry that's finally growing up, even though I have noted that potential gap between that sort of, viewership and monetization, which, every industry, every platform, we've all been struggling with that, but I think it's fascinating, and I think it's an industry worth sort of, watching. And my gosh, Goalhanger, I saw a couple of stats as well. It's up 80% this year on 50 million of revenue. That's extraordinary. So yeah, fascinating stuff. And of course, we are in the heart of that. And we just need to figure out our monetization model.
Yes. Well, we're not quite there yet. But yes, I think the definition is interesting, because somebody mentioned last week, Pete Davidson is launching something that is called a video podcast on Netflix. But that's a commission. It's a commission talk show. Netflix will keep the rights. They'll keep distribution rights. This is a podcast in the way that I think podcasters would define it. But this word podcast has come to cover an enormous amount of things. So probably at some point it will start having different meanings depending on how it's used. But as you say, it doesn't really matter. It is deep, long-form content, and you could compare it potentially to what used to be that middle ground of television, where these shows during the gardening shows, during the daytime TV, where you could cater to very specialist interests, and those are very difficult to make now because the money's not there. But podcasts have replaced that kind of consumption. So yes, fascinating world, and welcome to all of our younger listeners.
Yeah.
Do we call it the Middle Earth then? Do we call it something which has taken that view? There we go. We've just trademarked it. It. Your Middle Earth.
Exactly. We'll put that next to podmojis in our dictionary.
Okay. Yeah. Exactly. We're building our own taxonomy here. Look, yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, that's good. It's nice to know that we're going to be in the top 5% if we make it a little bit longer as well. And I hope we do have a younger.
In terms of longevity, obviously.
But that's what amazes me, I shield you from this, of course, because part of my job is to shield you from, shield the talent from the nastiness of business. And I get emails just probably about 3 a week now where AI has gone and scraped our content and said it was really interesting how Claire said blah, 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 blah. And I was very fascinated by Maureen's bit on this. And Oliver, you were very funny on when this thing. And you go, oh, that's very nice. And you go, oh, hang on, this has just been scraped in AI. Yeah. And then they say, are you interested in our SOA platform? Yeah. Please give us a call. Yeah. Maybe we should at some point, but we should be able to do our own SOA. But yes, congratulations on that lovely deep dive. Brilliant. It's phenomenal. I like the, what did you call it? Where there's a lot of people at the top end and a lot of people at the
barbell shape.
The barbell, yeah, it feels like that.
I did not really, that was a new word. Well, not a new word, but a new expression for me. I like it.
New metaphor.
We'll add it.
Yeah, and I love the rest is history. There is nothing like a couple of posh white men going on about stuff. It's absolutely beautiful. What a great thing. That is. There needs to be more of it.
That's a British trademark if there ever was one, isn't it?
Anywho's, let's move on. Deep dive 2. That's right. We're having another deep dive. This time it's more on business side and M&A. We've been talking about Paramount, Warner Brothers, Netflix, seemingly for as long as the Lord of the Rings went on. However, what we wanted to do, and who better to lead this discussion than Maureen, is to consolidate that into a general M&A topic using the examples that we've been through in the past. I know it's a particular specialism of yours and has been for years, Maureen, so who better to start that conversation? So so tell us a little bit about the latest in the saga and how it relates to M&A in general.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. Yeah, I mean, my God, I feel as if we should just stop talking about this and just let them get on with the integration, which is going to be damn bloody hard. And forgive my to younger listeners, forgive me for blaspheming there. But I just want to ground this a little
Or
bit and
older
just go.
listeners, I'm not sure who's going to be more
That's
shocked.
true. That's true. That's true. That's true. And for the older listeners who may flush, with me saying that. But let's just do a quick recap, and then I just want to make a couple of statements, and then I just want to talk about a couple of other things that are bubbling and surfacing that will make a big difference to the UK and what it all means when people say, "What's going on with consolidation in the UK TV production market?" So, all right, let's just say what has happened. So Warner Brothers Discovery has accepted the Paramount bid for its business, and the business is the entire business. And Netflix, Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters walked away from the deal. So, but let's just quickly unpack that a little. What's actually changing hands? And just look at the numbers are so big, it's ridiculous. I don't really understand some of these numbers. But Paramount, clearly, when it closes the deal, it will have bought a significant business with significant assets, as we know. It will have two major studio systems. It will have two major, kids IP and animation. It will have a significant factual engine that is Discovery Channel, the Food Network. It will have probably the biggest franchise, monetizable franchise systems in entertainment, which is Harry Potter and DC. So this is not just a media company they're buying. They are buying extraordinary franchises and assets. Okay. But what's really happened here is not the strategic rationale that underpins that particular deal. What's really happened here is a deal that closed was based on terms and not the strategic rationale in my books. And what do I mean by that? So I reckon that there are probably two people that are smiling and that believe that they are the victors in this. And don't forget, there are three parties. So you have Paramount Skydance, and you have Netflix, and you have Warner Brothers Discovery. So my reckoning is two people are smiling. Now, I wonder if we are probably saying, oh, I know those two people. Are they the same as Maureen's folks that are smiling? And I bet they're not. Anyway, so let's look at the bid path, and then I'll reveal whom I believe are smiling from this deal. So let's just do a quick recap just to put it in context, because I really want to talk about the capital structure that underpins this. So last year, before Warner Brothers started this deal process and before they were really active participants, the Warner Brothers share price was hovering around, and I think at a low point of $7. Come September, the Ellison camp came in and said, I'd like to buy the whole of Warner Brothers Discovery, and I'm offering $19 a share. Come February, they closed their bid at $31, all cash, as an enterprise value of around about 110, 111 billion. So a pretty sizable valuation added to Warner Brothers Discovery. Now, plus the sweeteners, and this is where I think is really important for me, just to set out quickly what those sweeteners were. So these sweeteners actually probably tell you why this deal got done and closed and why Netflix walked away. So as part of the sweeteners, which is basically to convince the Warner Brothers Discovery board, there is a $7 billion termination fee if the regulators block it. There is a ticking time bomb, which is associated with a fee that if this closing drags on beyond 1st of October in 2026, this year, and Paramount covers the $2.8 billion Netflix breakup fee. So that is what certainty costs when an auction gets really competitive and one side desperately wants the assets so badly that they remove any excuse for the seller to take on any other bid. So that, I think, is the reality of this. And I think it's produced something quite rare in mergers and acquisitions, in my view. And I've been working in mergers and acquisitions and strategy for a good few decades now. Usually, as I say, there's usually like one person who feels quite smug about the deal. In this instance, there are two people that are feeling smug about this deal. Okay. And I believe David Zaslav, who is CEO of Warner Brothers, he is definitely smiling. And I should, from an objective point of view, say that he ran a skillful auction. He extracted a materially better outcome than anyone expected early on. $19, $31. That's a big gap. So materially pretty important. And Ted Sarandos is the second person, Netflix, I believe, materially made gains in this bidding process, and yet they didn't win, but they did win. Okay. And I think that was because the strongest move that I have seen, and this is more probably psychologically, in a heated auction is sometimes refusing to keep playing in a process where you don't increase your bid once you believe the economics stop working for you. And you do not, there's no point in playing chicken with a buyer willing to pay irrationally. And if we go back to the top of my points there, where individuals who want badly these assets desperately become irrational and desperately overpays. And I think that's a scenario that we find ourselves in at the moment. And guess what? The market tends to reward that kind of discipline where you walk away with dignity. And guess what? Netflix walked away with dignity. It, during this process between December and February, lost significant market value in its shares, which was probably a function of its own board and the market, the institutional investors saying, we're not sure this is the right deal for you, Netflix. And I think it was to the tune of a couple of $100 billion valuation knockoff. So pretty significant. On the day, the morning that Netflix walked away, the share price increased 13%. That is a signal. That is a signal that, Ted, we believe in you. Greg, we believe in you. And you walked away with dignity. So I think there's something here, which is if you walk away with 2.8 billion breakup fee, you walk away and there's no leverage or debt on your balance sheet. You walk away, there's no leverage, there's no integration distraction. There's a clear, I think, runway of success where your closest competitor spends the next stretch of time, and probably 18 months, we hope it's less, of course, in regulatory approval and integration hell. Now, the reason I say integration hell is because that's a significant amount of debt that will sit on the books of this combined entity, and it's to the tune of around 60 billion. And 60 billion of debt is a 6 times, what we call 6 times leverage, so 6 times your profitability. The problem here is that's an historic high. It's not exotic, but it's an historic high. And then every decision that you make post-deal, where you have that balance sheet that is levered to that degree, every decision you make on licensing, every decision you make on green lighting, every decision you make on your creative teams wanting to develop a global hit, will be viewed through the lens of, okay, how quickly can we return an amount of cash that can pay down this debt? So the creative side with these extraordinary assets, these quality assets, will be constrained somewhat by how quickly can we return cash to pay down the debt. And I think that's what's going to be the constraint on this combined entity. Now, the combined entity is going to be pretty significant, almost 70 billion of revenue. It's also going to be 10 billion of profitability, plus, if you believe, 6 to 8 billion of synergies. Now, in order to achieve those synergies, guess what you have to do? You have to start to resize your cost structure to fit that revenue profile. And guess what? In media companies, as we all know, cost centers are people and productions. So if, as Ted Sarandos of Netflix said, in order for us to make the economics work, we would have to strip out 16 billion of costs. Paramount and Ellison's are saying it's probably around 6. But even so, that's pretty significant amount of cost savings. So we enter a period now where every single decision will be through that lens of can we pay down our debt? So sadly, I go back to who are the victors. So the victors, and probably the victor, probably is Netflix walking away from this. David Zaslav definitely did well for its board and for, let's just say, the shareholders, probably even for himself. But there's one thing I wanted, which was my sort of grace note about the coverage of this deal. And there's been so much, as we know, covering this deal. The one thing I discovered this in the Financial Times comments section, which was staggering. I sort of got bored of reading all the same articles, so I dropped down into the comments section, and on signing this bid and on presenting this bid, it was cited, and I don't know if this is apocryphal or real, but the Paramount executives sipped champagne out of paper cups. Now that's the mood of the transaction. One image I'm left with is celebration with paper cups, which is a faint sense that the invoice is probably already on the way. So I think this is an extraordinary deal. There'll be books, written about this. There will be masterclasses, presenting how this deal unfolded. But for me, the two victors are probably definitely Netflix and definitely Zaslav. I think the big struggle now is going to be the Ellisons having to realize this significant number of synergies that it needs to realize in order to pay down that significant amount of debt. And I think, and the sorry thing about this is the business itself, those extraordinary franchises, that will be to the detriment probably of their own successes, to continue performing, building good IP, delivering international formats and successes in theatrical. So it's kind of a sorry ending to this, and they haven't even closed yet because they've still got the regulatory approval, but it's really, really, really quite challenging. So anyway, that's on the distribution side. And Claire, I'd love to get your thoughts on that in a minute. And I'm just going to run to these two other interesting deals that are on. So in production hasn't stood still either. We now know that Banerjee, Mark Bassetti has decided to embrace Jane Turton over in All 3 Media, and they're going to merge. So you've got Banerjee and All 3 Media will become the preeminent and genuinely extraordinary heavyweight that is European production. So we're seeing stats now, and if you combine the two businesses, there's like 4 billion of pro forma revenues, enterprise value. So the valuation of the combined will be 8 billion. You've got some fantastic formats and IP that would definitely travel. You've got The Traitors, you've got Survivor, you've got MasterChef. It is a 50-50 ownership structure, but Marco will become the group CEO, and Jane will become a deputy CEO with Jeff Zucker chairing the board. The strategic logic here is definitely right. It is simple. It's not as complicated as the Paramount and Warner Brothers. If the global streamers are now the significant buyers, you need producers to really create scale. You need to negotiate, to retain talent, to finance development, and to monetize their IP beyond a single commission cycle through formats. So you really do need, in this instance, I think size and scale matters, and that's what we're seeing. But once you see the big mergers happening, and this is a big merger, eyes then fall onto what else remains in this sector. Of course, you've got Fremantle, which is tucked into RTL, and you've also got ITV and ITV Studios. So that comes to the third aspect of activity that's going on. And as Claire and I have spoken about, Sky, Comcast, looking to consolidate the UK market last year, nothing really happened and nothing has surfaced. So we've got Comcast looking to buy ITV, but ITV Media and Entertainment, which is the channels, and ITVX, not ITV Studios. So if indeed this deal goes through, and it's of course perhaps is being held up at the competition level, because the combined Sky and ITV will be 70% of the UK ad revenue. And Claire, you recall that in France, when you get to that level of dominance, depending on the market definition of advertising, the regulator does stand up and start to pay attention. So there's an issue here possibly, but we do have a potential ITV Studios that could separate from ITV Broadcast and ITVX. And so that also may be in the market. So we are definitely seeing UK consolidation in play. And I'm reckoning that consolidation and relevance will really sort of take hold. I do believe this is a good deal for Sky. I do believe they need that sort of free to air public service prominence position in the UK. It's likely to unfold, to happen, one suspects. But nonetheless, this is all around consolidation. This is all around having scale, and fighting and competing and defending one's assets. But I'll stop there and I'll pause there. But Claire, I'm sure you have a view on whom I believe are the two victors in the Warner Brothers, Netflix, Paramount, and indeed what's going to happen in the UK by way of consolidation.
Wow, that was a lot. That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Maureen. There was so much in there and such a great analysis of what's going on. There's not that much I can add, to be honest. That was incredible. I will say from a comms perspective, Netflix has flipped the narrative in a really interesting way. And that's what I've been struck about. When Netflix first bid for WBD, the general narrative was, oh my God, the bad guys from streaming trying to own our content. There were, the unions were against it. Everybody was against it. They encountered so much resistance. There was regulatory resistance, but there was also resistance from the industry. And Ted Sarandos has been on the media spree over the last few weeks, pointing out that where we've ended up actually is going to be much more damaging for the industry, especially for the people working in the industry, than his offer would have been, which is exactly probably what's going to happen, because as you pointed out, with the debt that the joint group is going to end up with, they're going to have to make some very, very significant cost cuttings. They just don't, even the Ellisons don't have that much cash. So I think Ted Sarandos and Netflix have now flipped the narrative to, well, Netflix are the one who are financially responsible, who know when to walk away, who, as you say, have the dignity, who don't hang on desperately to get something, and who are protecting the industry in a way that others maybe are not thinking about. So I think it's a very interesting flip in the narrative. Overall, I think the problem with all this consolidation, they make complete sense in what is essentially a contracting industry, is that more and more people will lose their jobs. So we've seen this in the last few years, and we're going to see more and more of this. Paramount, following the Skydance acquisition, there have been a lot of redundancy rounds there, and they're continuing, and WBD will be next. It's not going to be an easy year for media executives anywhere, and that's without even including the impact of AI. So it's going to be a tough year for all of these people. But yes, as you say, consolidation makes sense, and Netflix are the good guys, it turns out.
Wow, that's a great out. Netflix are the good guys, it turns out. Wow, there is a lot to unpick that. I think people might be having to listen to that more than once, really. There's quite a lot of content there, but I think I followed it. So thank you very much. That was a classic pair of deep dives, all for the price of one, which actually costs nothing, which I think is a fairly reasonable deal, actually, particularly with the expertise that we have in the room, in the virtual room. So we are, blimey, time is ticking on because we've squeezed so much into that. So we will have to go straight to podmojis. And I'm going to start with, I don't know, we haven't decided who to start, because I'm going to start with Claire, I think. Podmojis, the first one, and I'm expecting fantastic props this time. Scream 7, really? 7? Scream 7 at the box office. Claire.
Okay, that Podmoji writes itself, right?
There she goes. We've had that one before, but it's very, very good. Sort of Macaulay Culkin-esque, for those of you not watching on video.
Yeah, exactly. So Scream 7 came out. It's delivered a franchise best opening. Very, very strong opening weekend worldwide, $97.2 million. New best opening for the franchise. We're now at 104, $105 million. It's probably going to drop quite sharply in the second weekend because the reviews are terrible. And it's sort of, is the script of these incredibly strong horror franchises, which seems to be sort of critic proof and have an in-bit fan base, and people know exactly what they're getting, and it's not may not be amazing, but they know that they're going to get a good popcorn movie and they go out. So good for them. It's Neve Campbell is back. She was the Scream Queen, the original Scream Queen, so that's a big draw as well for audiences. But yeah, it just goes to show that horror is a very, very exciting genre at the moment, and one of the sure bets or semi-sure bets of the box office, much more so than any other genres. That's all I have on this one. It's exciting. Good. I haven't seen it, so can't comment more than that. But it's in the mid-30s on Rotten Tomatoes. Let me put
Oh dear, I don't think that's very good. Is it sort of self-referential as well? It's sort of like mocking
I
itself
think
a
it
little
probably
bit.
is. I mean, again, I wouldn't know.
I think people are missing a point here. I truly believe. I think this is the best example when theatrical rewards something absolutely right, which is
Yeah.
basically low budget. No one takes any notice of the 34% Rotten Tomatoes critic score. It doesn't matter if you go to the viewers' score; it's up in the 80s and 90s. So, the story behind this is around ownership. And Claire, you remember this. So Scream was part of Weinstein. And of course, when all not shenanigans, the legal issues that beset Weinstein family and Weinstein Company, which led to Weinstein's bankruptcy, was that Scream franchise and a lot of the other catalogue became a distressed asset. And a private equity firm called Spyglass came in, swooped it up for peanuts, absolute peanuts. And so started this sort of session where they've come in and they have rebooted it. So you're absolutely right. They've got fantastic ability to bring in the old cast, and they brought in, including Kevin Williamson as well, returning to the top. They actually have made the best of these Screams from, I think it was Scream 5. So no, I think this is a fantastic franchise, low critics score, that it doesn't matter. It's community driven. It's self-selecting. It's about the fan base. So no, I think it's amazing. I think it's absolutely amazing, and lessons to be learned for the rest of the industry. So I've got the instead pom-poms.
Oh, wow.
Very good.
Yeah,
That's
Muppet
impressive.
Show-esque. Very nice.
Cheerleading. Yeah.
I was going to
very-
go O, but Claire did that. So
Well, you
I've
did
gone
the
with
O.
pom-pom.
You also did the O last week, so you get
I
several points for that. That's a good 2.0. They're very good pom-poms and excellent waving, very energetic. And we've only got time for one more. And it's a good one though, and it's I'll start with Maureen. Actually, I'll go back to Maureen. So this is the one where we have Ofcom now regulating streamers, which is, I don't know, it's probably a good thing. Maureen.
Yeah, the UK is finally dragging streamers into something closer to a broadcast style regulatory framework at the moment. So under the Media Act rollout, we've now had, I think, any services with more than 500 or half a billion UK users, which of course then includes Netflix, Prime, and other major platforms, will now be brought into Ofcom's new Tier 1 regime. And that means standards, obligations about accessibility requirements for on-demand content. So I don't know, this is it's not really about content moderation. It's about the sort of slow sort of erosion of regulatory asymmetry that has benefited streamers for years. So it's basically bringing them into, a level playing field from a regulatory point of view. So you either see that as good or bad, depending on your stance of whether or not markets should be regulated. So, closing that gap, I think, as I say, doesn't really change the competitive picture overnight, but I think it does start to enforce this level playing field. So I think for the wider European picture, Ofcom does lead, and maybe other national regulators will follow suit. It's a correction, and it is dealing with this asymmetry in a regulatory environment. So it's okay.
Is that
It's a bit like godfathering.
Yeah.
It's my godfather. Okay. It is
sort of
what it
New
is.
York Jewish kind of, whatever.
We're going Italian, Jewish,
or Italian,
whatever.
Well, forget about it. That's what I
Yeah.
like. So, you just said the gradual erosion of regulatory asymmetry. What an absolutely beautiful phrase. Every
just
word
comes up
doing a
with
job
these
of work.
things. Yeah.
A gradual erosion of regulatory asymmetry. Wow.
It's because
wow.
I'm not very good. It's because I'm not very good at the podmojis, which Claire excels at. I have to come up with phrases, and
That's a good one,
clauses
though.
and sentences. That's
You've
what I focus on a
encapsulated
week.
it in a mere 37 syllables. No, I think that was amazing. The gradual erosion of regulatory asymmetry. I love that. Claire, over to you.
I don't know how I'm going to compete with that. I will say, okay, I am going to try. I'm going to bring my
she's off.
on-air sign. Yeah, because what we're doing. Oh, you've got one too. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
We are finally, as Maureen said, I think she's completely right. We're finally redefining what being on air means and what television means, and we've waited long enough because this is the year where streaming has actually overtaken live television. So there's more people watching streaming than there are more content being watched streaming. It's not so much the people than there is watched live. The parallel move that's happening is that the BBC and the government are starting to say that people who only watch streaming should also pay a license fee. And if you remember in the past, that wasn't the case. And that's what was the sentence that Maureen said? This is about
it's a gradual erosion of regulatory asymmetry.
Yeah, so I think
that was a classic
now we
case.
need to get to have the gradual erosion of financial asymmetry, which is funding asymmetry, which is I think the next step, and I think it makes sense. So we're aligning standards with Ofcom, and I do believe it's a good thing. I absolutely believe in the fact that content should have some regulatory oversight, and that's something that we should also talk about when we talk about podcasts. We didn't go into that, but that's an issue there. And I think Ofcom does generally quite a good job of it. And then the next step is okay, but also, money. So I've been very interested to read about the BBC. And it's not just the BBC, clearly, it's the government as well. It's a joint approach talking about, license fee being paid by anybody who watches televisual content, whether it's on Netflix or on the BBC, in order to continue to fund our public service broadcasters. And I wonder where that argument's going to go. I'm sure that will be pushed back against quite hard, but I believe in it. So yes, we're redefining what on air means, really.
And
pleased with my podmoji actually on that one.
Yeah, it's very good. It was actually spelled it out literally with a prop.
Yeah, exactly.
So
pom-poms.
So extra pom-poms. So okay, so you get extra 0 points for that, making it a draw this week. 2.1 points each. You got so it's a draw.
Good.
Well done. Yeah, and also we've also not only made up an abbreviation. It's an acronym as well. GEAR. If we say the gradual erosion of asymmetric regulation, so we changed the last two words, we've got ourselves an acronym and an abbreviation, which is GEAR.
Oh,
so it's gearing, which is brilliant.
You could have SERA as well, which is the slow erosion of regulatory asymmetry.
Oh my God, it's non-stop.
Yeah, but that's not an acronym. That's just an abbreviation, because SERA isn't really a word. That's why I like GEAR. You know what I mean?
Richard Serra is my favourite sculptor, my favourite artist, actually. He does mobiles. Absolutely wonderful. I love him. So I lean towards Sarah. It is, yeah. I think
we'll put it on. We'll do a poll on LinkedIn to see what people prefer.
Yeah. Also, it's the plural of serum. Sarah is.
Oh well, there you go.
The quickest Googler in the West. So they're both brilliant. I quite like gear because it's sort of like it's a noun and a potential adjective. Anyway, whatever, you've invented a brilliant new acronym, and we've had a brilliant time. We've had a lot. We've had 2 deep dives, podcasts and M&A, and we've had a couple of podmojis. We've had some laughs. You done some brilliant work, great detail this time as well. But like all good things, we have to end. So I will say goodbye to you, Maureen.
Goodbye, but there's a second one as well, which I love, which is the barbell. I've taken away the barbell.
Yeah.
The barbell years.
Remember the barbell.
So at some point we can build a whole model.
Yeah, I think we're probably on the grippy end of the barbell, but getting better every time. We're not doing this for money. We're doing this as a public service. Claire, goodbye to you as well.
I thought you were going to say passion, but public service is good as well.
I feel passion for this project as well. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you very much. Goodbye, Oliver.
Thank you. Goodbye to everyone. We'll see you on the next one, but for now, bye-bye.